We launched Bard as a limited access experiment on a lightweight large language model.
I think Google catching up to OpenAI in LLMs is almost inevitable. I mean, Google invented transformer neural nets within Google Brain, right?
Dr. Ben Goertzel, who helped build Sophia the robot.
Founder and CEO of SingularityNet, Ben Goertzel.
I heard Sam Altman say on stage specifically that they are not training or building ChatGPT 5 right now.
Maybe they're training ChatGPT 4.5. Maybe they're training GPT 4 Turbo. I will guarantee you they're proceeding full speed ahead on whatever R&D avenue they think is most productive.
All fingers are pointing to open source decentralization as the fastest way to improve these technologies. Well, that's been the bedrock of everything you've been doing at SingularityNet, which of course then funnels right into everything you're going to do with Zarka.
What the open source world will do with LLMs is going to be cooler and cleverer than what big tech companies do with LLMs. The AGI race is on, and that's exciting. Some of us have been waiting for it for a long time. You know, it's good now you're taking time to think very deeply through all these different aspects of what it takes to make a thinking machine, because at some point, things are going to start unfolding like bang, 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 bang. There's going to be a lot of money. There's going to be a lot of competition. There's going to be a lot of pressure. And you're not going to have, 6 months to think about the best way to interleave uncertainty with deductive logic. The race is on, and I think we've got a good chance of winning. And the thing is, we're not looking to win for ourselves. We're looking to win for the whole of humanity, which is the beauty of decentralized models.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Dr. Ben Goertzel, the scientist, futurist, author, and entrepreneur. You are considered one of the world's foremost experts in artificial general intelligence and have submitted over 150 technical papers and published 25 scientific books on the subject. In 2017, you founded SingularityNet with the goal of creating a decentralized, democratic, inclusive, and beneficial artificial general intelligence. Your latest project, Zarka, is a supercharged, intelligent, neurosymbolic, large language model at massive scale and promises to take on OpenAI's ChatGPT, but go much, much further. You believe that your advanced neurosymbolic AI techniques will revolutionize and disrupt every industry, taking a giant step towards artificial general intelligence, or AGI. Ultimately, your goal is to realize a positive and beneficial singularity for the good of all humanity by building sentient beings of the future to be loving, caring, compassionate, inclusive, and democratic. Ben, welcome back to London Real.
Great to be back again. Yeah, always more and more strange realities unfolding to dig into.
Yeah, there's so much happening in this space. It's great to be checking with you on a regular basis. Before we get started, I just want to say that if anybody's interested in learning more about your new project, Zarka, they can go to londonreal.tv/Zarka to request more information. We will be investing in Zarka through London Real Ventures, and everybody here on the team is super excited to support you in this amazing venture. Let's jump into it, Ben. There's been a lot of crazy headlines. The big one, well, there's a bunch of big ones, but the one that got a lot of people's attention was the re-release of Google Bard as kind of a reply to ChatGPT that had moved way ahead of Google, and we thought maybe it was leaving it in the dust. Google came out with Bard, connected it to the live internet, allowed it to plug right into your Google Docs and email, etc. And a lot of people are saying that now it's back. Google is back competing head-to-head with OpenAI. I was just curious if you had any thoughts on this, Ben. Also, I'm curious how you feel about a large language model like this being plugged into real-time internet data as opposed to ChatGPT, which was only archived back to 2021.
I think these are all pretty obvious developments. I mean, it was clear that ChatGPT not being trained on data up to the minute was just a sort of random artifact of when they chose to release it. Like there's no fundamental obstacle to training transformer neural nets on up to the minute data. And I mean, there's no fundamental obstacle to making a transformer that you can update real time as new data comes in. I mean, OpenAI didn't do it that way at first just because they were basically creating a research project that came out cooler than they thought, so they decided to release it early, right? And I think Google catching up to OpenAI in LLMs is almost inevitable. I mean, Google invented transformer neural nets within Google Brain, right? And I mean, Google DeepMind and Google Brain, either one of those independently is a far stronger AI team than OpenAI in a lot of ways. I mean, OpenAI, they made a different call in terms of narrow focusing a lot of resources only on training big transformer models and then putting them out as product, even when they were like really early stage prototyping with a lot of weird aspects. And Google didn't make either of those calls, right? Like, even though they invented transformers, they didn't like double and triple down on them like OpenAI did. And they had very cool transformers in Lambda, and they chose not to release them publicly because they were too iffy in terms of giving screwball responses, right? So I mean, Google made a bunch of calls that were questionable on the business side in hindsight, but clearly they're super strong on AI in general and on transformers, which they invented in particular, right? So it's pretty obvious that OpenAI's lead is temporary, right? Now, that doesn't mean OpenAI's lead is meaningless. I mean, Microsoft also has really, really strong AI R&D division in Microsoft Research, generally speaking. In many ways, stronger than OpenAI also, although not in the specific domain of transformers. So I mean, OpenAI / Microsoft are certainly, they're viable competitors to Google, but Google being in the running is hardly surprising. And I think we also saw a memo leaked out of Google not that long ago stating basically, well, we have no moat and OpenAI also has no moat. Like, basically, there's nothing fundamental stopping open source from eating everybody's lunch in large language models. And I would say that it hasn't quite happened yet, but you can clearly see that avenue unfolding. I mean, right now, Facebook's Llama model, which was leaked onto the internet with little help from 4chan, right? I mean, so Facebook put the model out there, but they didn't release the weights, which is a key part of what makes the model do stuff. Then that was somehow leaked into 4chan. Then everyone had it. Then Facebook was like, okay, fine, everyone can have it for non-commercial purposes. The amount of work that's been done on the open source Llama model just in the last weeks has been tremendous. Right now, GPT-4 seems smarter than Llama. Llama's around the GPT 3.5 level. it seems like. But, it's clear that's not a fundamental lead that can't be overcome either, right? So the Google engineer who wrote the there is no moat memo was just looking a little ahead in the future, and he's seeing, well, what the open source world will do with LLMs is going to be cooler and cleverer than what big tech companies do with LLMs, just because there's more people out there in the open source community than any one company. So the lead of having a model with more parameters in a big tech company is not tremendously sustainable. I mean, given that VCs are out there funding companies building open source LLMs, right? I mean, Stability AI is there, for example, and the Eleuther is there, and Zarka, which you mentioned, which is a Singularity Net ecosystem project aimed at training neural symbolic LLMs running in a decentralized fabric. I mean, this is going to do open source large language models also, right? So, I mean, the investment community is funding smaller tech companies with open source friendly business models. There's no fundamental reason OpenAI is going to maintain a lead there, nor that Google is going to maintain a lead there, really. So, I mean, what we're seeing is pretty much the inevitable catch up of everyone else to OpenAI. And yeah, the dialogues within OpenAI and Microsoft have got to be quite different than what many people would naively think. Because if people are thinking, well, okay, OpenAI owns the singularity, you can be sure that's not what they're thinking internally. What they're thinking internally is everybody basically knows how to do this, and everybody else is putting so much money and attention into this now. Like, how do we maintain a lead given that we've shot our biggest load already, right? Because in taking the next step beyond where GPT-4 is now, it's not clear that OpenAI/Microsoft has an especially big advantage, right? Like Sam Altman has already been quite public saying, well, training bigger and bigger models on more and more parameters may be interesting, but it's not like the magic sauce to incredible future progress. But if the magic sauce to incredible future progress is coming up with a fundamentally altered or improved transformer architecture, or if it's, say, hybridizing a transformer with a knowledge graph and reasoning on that knowledge graph, right, then it's not clear that in taking those further steps, OpenAI has such a huge advantage. I mean, if it's coming up with a better variation of the transformer architecture, well, why not Google, who invented transformers in the first place, right? And if it's hybridizing transformers with logical reasoning engines and other forms of AI, like, why not, for example, us, Singularity Net, Zarka, True AGI, right? Why not us, who have been hybridizing neural nets with logic and evolutionary systems for decades, right? Like, they're OpenAI's lead in the next leg of the AGI race is not especially obvious when you dig in deeply, though they've gotten certainly an interesting mind share and market share lead. But I'd say that, you could try to draw an analogy with Google's lead in search, but I don't think it's a perfect analogy, in that Google had a sort of positive feedback loop with search and ads, right? So that they got people locked into search, then they got people clicking on ads, and because there were people clicking on their ads, companies used AdSense. So there was this advertising revenue model that had this sort of flywheel effect there, right? And their lead in search sort of boosted this flywheel of people clicking on ads and people placing ads. So there was a sort of increasing returns revenue model associated with ads that tied in with their early lead in search. And we don't see that OpenAI has that now, right? Like they don't have some amazing new revenue model innovation that they're boosting with their early lead in the conversational LLM market, right? I mean, their way of making money is API calls and subscriptions, but anyone can do that, right? That doesn't have these sort of flywheel increasing returns dynamics that gives you more defensibility. In fact, it's not really clear how Google or Microsoft will make money from these things, right? I mean, because they sort of, which is probably part of the reason Google didn't rush to launch their own generative AI chatbots. I mean, apart from them feeling uneasy about the amount of unrealistic, non-factual bullshit they generate. I mean, also replacing a list of search results with a natural language summary doesn't have an obvious advertising business model associated with it, right? So it's not clear. I mean, Google can try to intersperse paid stuff with the barred results, but that's uglier than putting ads to the side of your list of links, right? But OpenAI also doesn't have such a defensible business model, right? Because subscriptions are not that defensible against anyone else offering the same thing with a slightly lower subscription price or something, right? So yeah, I think it's definitely, ChatGPT was a black swan event from the economic point of view, and is a threshold in terms of practically deployed technology. But it's really like opening up a new era, and things are pretty wide open in this new era, and it's not at all clear if OpenAI will be the Google or the Yahoo of this new era.
Yeah, very well said. It's interesting when Google plugs in, you realize Google has this massive audience from search to YouTube to Gmail to the documents. And then you look at OpenAI and you realize it has no audience. It had zero audience before ChatGPT was released. And like you said, how quickly that can be taken away.
In enterprise, Microsoft has a huge audience, right?
In
because
enterprise.
So many businesses use Azure and use Microsoft Office Suite and so forth, and they're gonna integrate OpenAI's tools there, which may cement their ownership of the enterprise. I mean, Google has Google Docs and Google Enterprise tools, but they're not actually meeting the needs of enterprise as well as Microsoft Office Suite integrated with Azure, right? And that's a problem that it's not clear generative AI overcomes the factors that have caused Google not to make great enterprise products, right? I mean, it could help because generative AI can be an interface to enterprise software, but it doesn't fully solve the problem. So I think Microsoft will do just fine, right? I mean, they can roll out generative AI to transform all of their enterprise and Office applications and so forth, and that can be very, very big for them. Whereas, for sort of retail end user, Google has a lot of users and a lot of data to play with. And I mean, I haven't actually switched from using Google, Brave, and DuckDuckGo to Bing. And probably you haven't either, right? I mean, no. I did use Bing a few times when the Bing chatbot was out there, especially the completely insane version, which was fun to talk to. But I mean, in the end, I'm sure it's grown Bing's market share a little bit. I haven't looked it up, but it's not. I mean, Google has responded fast enough that the feared draining of Google's audience to Bing has not happened, right?
Yeah. It hasn't happened. And funny you said that about OpenAI, because I heard Sam Altman say on stage specifically that they are not training or building ChatGPT 5 right now. He's like, we're not training that right now. And I thought that was interesting. But
well, I take that with many grains of salt. Yeah. I mean, maybe they're training ChatGPT 4.5. I mean, they went from 3 to 3.5. Maybe they're training GPT-4 Turbo, right? I
Maybe.
mean, I just took that to mean he doesn't want to scare people.
Could be.
And I mean, that's
Oh,
so yeah. I think I will guarantee you they're proceeding full speed ahead on whatever R&D avenue they think is most productive at this point in time, and assigning names and dot version labels to these things is a marketing action, not a technology action.
okay. Demis Hassabis, founder of DeepMind, that was purchased by Google many years ago for $500 million, I think. He's now in charge of, I think is it Google Brain now? They merged the two companies.
He's in charge of just Google's whole AI initiative.
Yeah.
And Jeff Dean, who was running Google Brain, moved to some loftier executive position, I guess. I mean, Jeff Dean had done Android before, right? He's bounced around to a few things. Yeah, that's, to me, is quite significant in terms of the global push towards AGI, because I mean, not that Jeff Dean was anti-AGI, but he's not like an AGI guy, right? I mean, he did a bunch of really cool AGI-ish things. I mean, he led Deep Math, which was Google's foray into automated theorem proving, as well as transformer neural nets, right? I mean, Google Brain did amazing stuff. Google Maps was started under Peter Norvig and then further developed under Jeff Dean. But while Jeff Dean is amazing, he's not from the AGI world so much. Whereas, I mean, Demis Hassabis started Google DeepMind to build artificial general intelligence, right? And Shane Legg, who was one of his two co-founders, you know, he worked for me from something like 98 to 2001. I taught him a lot about AGI also. He did a PhD thesis on the mathematics of AGI. And within DeepMind, Shane has been leading a team focused just on artificial general intelligence, while Demis has been sort of ruling over all the different projects that DeepMind does, right? So what you now have hardcore AGI guys running Google's AI team, and this has a lot of complex aspects. On the one hand, it means resources for AGI will not be hard to come by within Google, right? And on the other hand, it may mean that Demis gets distracted from AGI because his job is now running all the AI for all of Google, which has to focus on making Google money. Now, I don't think Shane will be distracted to the extent his mandate is to run a focused AGI team, and he may have had all the resources he wanted for that AGI team already, but I mean, certainly it'll be easier for him to pull Google Brain people into his AGI development module now, right? So I think it's a pretty powerful mainstreaming of AGI. I mean, I don't think it's just because Demis is a cool guy, although he's a very capable guy. I mean, I think that's Google founders deciding we need to move faster, we need to move more ambitiously, or we're going to lose the AGI race. And so they're deciding to double down on winning the AGI race by putting their AGI guys in charge, right? So that's a quite interesting move, and it will be analogous to Microsoft putting all of their AI research teams like out of Microsoft Research and under the management of OpenAI, right? Which Microsoft is not at this point doing.
Okay. Based on all of this, how does it make you feel about Zarka? Because 2 weeks ago, when you mentioned that Mode article about Google, you just kept saying all fingers are pointing to open source decentralization as the fastest way to improve these technologies. And that's exactly that's been the bedrock of everything you've been doing at Singularity Net, which of course then funnels right into everything you're going to do with Zarka. So how are you feeling about your new venture and how it's going to be able to compete with these massive trillion-dollar tech companies?
So I think clearly the AGI race is on. and that's exciting. Some of us have been waiting for it for a long time. And, I remember in the period, say 2005 through 2011-12, I was working on this 2-volume book called Engineering General Intelligence, which had a bunch on deep neural nets and language processing and logical reasoning, mental simulation modeling, long short-term memory, attention, self-modifying AI and all that. And one thing I was thinking while I was working on these books together with a couple co-authors was, it's good now you're taking time to think very deeply through all these different aspects of what it takes to make a thinking machine, because at some point things are going to start unfolding like bang, 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 bang. There's going to be a lot of money. There's going to be a lot of competition. There's going to be a lot of pressure. And you're not going to have, 6 months to think about the best way to interleave uncertainty with deductive logic, right? And you're not going to have 6 months to think about how does simulation modeling really tie with hierarchical perception and with cognitive control of perception. And so as I was carefully thinking through all these things over a period of years, playing with prototype code and writing books and papers, it was in my mind like we're like stockpiling knowledge and understanding about how to do things. We can't do all of them yet because computers are too slow and we don't have the money to hire people to write all the code. We can write prototype code, we can write math, we can think it through. And then when push comes to shove, we're going to have all this thinking done in advance. We're going to be able to take all this stuff out of the research closet and deploy it using the tools that are available at that time. And so now I feel like that time has come, right? So now the fact that we've already thought through how to solve so many of the problems that you confront on the path to making an AGI, that comes to serve as an advantage for us. Because indeed, in my life right now, I don't have time to think for 6 months, just sitting myself in a room for 6 months, walking out in the woods every day, musing undistracted about like how do you interleave higher order uncertainty with probabilistic deduction or something, right? I don't, because I'm just leading too many crazy projects, trying to deploy impactful stuff too fast. I try to carve out hours or a few days here and there for deep thinking, but I'm not able to carve out months for deep thinking in what I'm doing right now. But we've got all this stuff that we can bring to bear. And I think that is one of the two advantages that we have over big tech in the AGI race. So one of the advantages is, compared to the teams working on AGI within big tech companies, not just me, but the rest of our team in SingularityNet and OpenCog ecosystem, some of whom are within Zarka, some within True AGI, some within SingularityNet Foundation, some within the OpenCog open source community. I think this group of AGI researchers and developers we have has actually been thinking about, prototyping about, working on AGI related tech longer than anyone in OpenAI, and longer and with more breadth and depth than most people in Google for that matter. So that's, we don't have as many engineers as they do, but we've got a lot of length and depth of thinking in our team. Now, you've got a team currently of dozens of AGI researchers in our side versus much larger teams within these big tech companies. But there's a lot of history in the software world that a modest sized team of the right people with a unified purpose and the right mindset and knowledge have upended behemoth companies over and over and over and over again. So I think now that LLMs have shown what they can do, there's a lot of thinking about, okay, how do we connect LLMs with knowledge graphs to solve their issues with factuality? how do we connect them with, say, Wolfram Alpha or other, more structured reasoning systems so they can do multi-step reasoning better? Well, we've been working on connecting neural nets with knowledge graphs and logic systems for decades, right? And then we haven't had the compute firepower to do what GPT-4 can do now. But in terms of the next step being connecting LLMs with knowledge graphs and structured reasoning, I mean, we have far more depth of knowledge and far more detailed plans of how to do that than a Google or Microsoft does. So that this is one advantage I think we have, is just better knowledge and more in-depth worked out plans about what is the next step beyond these sorts of large language models that are having so much success now. The other advantage that we have is shared by the rest of the open source world, and this goes back to there is no moat memo, right? I mean, I think in the end, open will defeat closed, because the breadth of knowledge and the breadth of skill and just the human power in the decentralized ecosystem of open source developers is just way more, right? And so I think that's a substantial advantage, which we can leverage. I mean, Luther can leverage it, Stability AI can leverage it, but Google and Microsoft can only partially leverage it, just due to the nature of their own tech stacks, let alone their business models. Like when you get a job working for Google, you spend 6 months learning their 2 to 3 billion lines of proprietary code, right? They've just got really efficient tech stacks of proprietary code. They're great at what they do, but since they don't want to open all that, because it contains so much commercially valuable stuff to them, since they don't want to open that tech stack, they can't really operate in close coordination with the open source world. Whereas we can build things in SingularityNet and Zarka and TrueAGI. In our ecosystem, we can build things from the get-go with maximum back and forth with the open source world in mind. I mean, that doesn't mean every single bit of code built within Zarka or TrueAGI has to be open source, or every model trained for whatever purpose has to be open. I mean, SingularityNet will be that way because of the sort of entity it is. These commercial spin-offs don't have to do only open source things, but they can build their architectures in a way that's designed to get the maximum out of the open source world, which is not what these big companies have done, right? And this gets into technical stuff, but like if you look at how these big companies are leveraging their massive GPU server farms, they're using an algorithm called MapReduce, and everything is MapReduce, right? Now, MapReduce is great for deep neural nets. It's great for computer graphics. It's not great for reasoning on knowledge graphs. For reasoning on knowledge graphs, you need smarter ways to map your algorithms onto GPUs and parallel processors. Now, we have those smarter ways. We're borrowing them from a project called RChain. So we're working with a guy named Greg Meredith, who founded RChain. He developed a formalism called the row calculus, which goes far beyond MapReduce in its ability to map complex graph algorithms into GPUs. He had that out in the open source world inside his Rolang language. So we're able to connect our OpenCog Hyperon system to his open source Rolang system, right? And then we can use his post-MapReduce method for parallelizing stuff. And then we can use this within OpenCog to provide the symbolic part of a neural symbolic LLM, right? Which we can then roll out within Zarka and TrueAGI and SingularityNet. So there's two interesting things here, right? I mean, one is we have a path to neural symbolic large language models by connecting OpenCog that already does symbolic reasoning to neural large language models that will be deployed on Zarka's server farms, right? And big tech companies don't have that path because they don't have the knowledge of OpenCog's reasoning engine for sophisticated reasoning on knowledge graphs. But the other thing is, the way we're going to make this scalable is by connecting to Greg Meredith's open source row calculus code from our chain project. And that's an avenue that Google and Amazon and Microsoft don't have, even though Greg worked for Microsoft for many years, just because their tech stacks are big, hairy, and proprietary. They're not built for sort of interleaving with other people's open source code. So I think there's a lot of advantages big tech has. They got customers, they've got money, they've got hardware, they've got big teams. On the other hand, we have better algorithms for the next phase, and we also have the ability to interoperate very flexibly with the open source community, which is a very, very powerful force. So I think we've got also our own big advantages in the race to AGI, which should make this next phase very, very interesting, right? Because getting back to some of the broader sort of political or geopolitical and social aspects that we've discussed in some of our previous conversations. I mean, if the next big leap beyond ChatGPT is launched in the decentralized world, right, then suddenly you've got a substantial portion of the world economy running on blockchain, right? And so one thing that Tufi Saliba, who's running Hypercycle project, which did a successful token sale just a couple of weeks ago, this is a ledgerless layer 1 blockchain, or Tufi's calling it a layer 0 plus blockchain, because it's at one level it's like a secure communication protocol, almost like a blockchain-based TCP/IP. On the other hand, you could use it as a side chain on top of other blockchains, but let's call it a layer 1 for simplicity, right? So one thing he's doing there, he's reaching out to people running Bitcoin mining farms around the world and Ethereum mining farms, and he's saying, well, hey, you know what? You'll make more money using some of your infrastructure to do AI instead of crypto mining. And especially true post the Ethereum merge, right? Because Ethereum mining is not a thing anymore, really. It's not as lucrative. It's proof of stake, right? So, Bitcoin mining is still a thing. But these folks with large server farms they're using for crypto mining, if they upgrade the GPUs in their machines, they can run cutting-edge AI algorithms, right? Then they can run hypercycle nodes. And then they can make money from AI instead. So you have a concrete path there to having next generation of AI running on a decentralized hardware network, including server farms in Paraguay, Turkmenistan, and South Korea, wherever else, the Middle East, all over the globe, right? So what's interesting to me there is the idea of having a global compute infrastructure. SingularityNet always allowed that, but this sort of business angle of reaching out to crypto mining farm operators to run sort of AI clusters within our decentralized AI network, this makes that very concrete in a very specific way, because these crypto mining farms really are all over the world and all sorts of weird jurisdictions, right? So then when you go to something like Zarka, the SingularityNet spinoff oriented specifically toward training large language models for retail use, so basically toward making a neural symbolic decentralized infrastructure ChatGPT killer, right? So when you talk about that, we are going to construct our own server farm for Zarka, because our tech lead there, Sergey Shalapin, has a lot of experience building supercomputers, GPU supercomputers, specifically for LLMs, right? But we can also make use of compute power on Hypercycle's decentralized compute network, spanning people's home computers and all these crypto mining farms, right? So we can use a mix of our own server farm and this decentralized network of machines running on hypercycle. And I mean, it's more flexibility in getting the hardware behind the AI than big tech has, right?
Yeah.
Which can mean lower cost of operation, which can then mean, lower cost of use for the consumer, which would mean Zarka's ChatGPT killer language model software can not only be smarter because we're integrating OpenCog's reasoning, it can be cheaper because Hypercycle is letting it source some of its compute power from this decentralized network. Like Paraguay has this dam. It's like 14 gigawatts of electricity shared between Paraguay and Brazil, right? And Paraguay is selling a bunch of these gigawatts to Brazil at a low price because they don't need all that electricity. But we're talking to Paraguay, who's building huge data centers like next to that dam, next to the Brazil border, to use these gigawatts of electricity. And they're, I mean, informally and not yet fully committed, but they seem to be down to running a whole bunch of hypercycle nodes there in these huge server farms next to their dam, right? So if we run a bunch of Zarka's LLM there through Hypercycle's decentralized compute network, right? I mean, then you just got cheaper electricity than Google or Microsoft has,
yeah.
Right? I mean, of
Ben,
course.
Can I ask you a question about revenue? Because you did mention that ChatGPT might struggle to make money. And I just saw a tweet by Mark Yusko. He runs Morgan Creek Capital, one of the big blockchain investors. And he just said, I haven't seen the revenue models yet for AI or even AGI. And I'm curious, where do you see the money coming in? And how do you think that will play out with Zarka, for example? Because ultimately these things do have to make money.
Well, I think the money is coming in from everywhere in the end. I mean, that's a little bit like asking, where does money come in from integrated circuits or something? Because I think LLMs are a fundamental technology rather than an end user product, and I think that AGI is also fundamental technology rather than an end user product. So I mean, I think OpenAI is doing the right thing by rolling out the plugin architecture they did, right? So I mean, plugins that use GPT-4 will have their own user interfaces, and they will be serving users in particular niches. So I mean, I think a retail chat interface like ChatGPT is worthwhile. It's interesting. It plays a role. I mean, people have questions. They want to get answers to questions. Like it's not a bad thing, but I don't think that's the primary revenue engine. Actually, I think the primary revenue engine will be licensing the API calls to plugins that then serve particular vertical markets. And I think for Zarka, it will be the same way. I mean, we will make a ChatGPT type interface for web or for mobile or voice based you can use through your Pixel Watch or whatever. I mean, we will make that, and people will use it, and it will be cool, right? On the other hand, we will also make a plugin architecture which will allow people to build whatever application they want, accessing Zarka's neural symbolic language model with APIs. And the revenue models for these plugins will be as numerous as there are vertical markets, right? I mean that's all over the place. But our plugin architecture.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.
So Jim Rickards has just recorded a video that's not available to anyone in the public, and he's going to be talking about how this upcoming recession is going to be fast, it's going to be bloody, it's going to be nasty. But at the same time, he's going to show you how you can position yourself to profit from all of this chaos. Now, we've made this video only available to our viewers. Go to londonreal.tv/Jim. Watch that immediately. I can't say enough good things about Jim Rickards. He understands the global economic system better than any guest I've ever had on London Real. His predictions are almost uncannily true, and you can learn how to profit from his vision, from his expertise, and his understanding of economics. So go to londonreal.tv/Jim or click the link below. It's an excellent, excellent look on what's going to happen in the future and how you can position yourself to profit from that. Jim is one of the best in the business, one of my favorite guests on London Real, and he's very, very good at predicting the future and showing us all to profit from it. So click the link, and I hope you enjoy. Hey, it's Brian Rose, founder of the DeFi Academy. I've told you my 4-week crypto bootcamp is amazing, but don't take my word for it. This is what my students are saying.
The DeFi Academy was an amazing experience for me. It took me totally out of my comfort zone.
In this course, I was challenged, I was held accountable, and pushed to do things that honestly weren't always easy.
It's been phenomenal, and I can't believe we're already up on our 4 weeks. It has flown by.
Going through this DeFi accelerator by far was one of the best courses I've taken.
You do this course, you really get into the nitty-gritty of the activities that will make you comfortable with decentralized finance.
Thank you so much to Brian and everyone at London Real and the DeFi Academy for even putting together an amazing course like this.
Anybody else that wants to do it, please sign up. It is well worth the money.